I'm Cathy Stragar, and I've been a naturalist for almost 20 years, and I'm trained as an entomologist as well. And I'm going to talk tonight about the singing insects, and I'm going to try to focus on the ones that are in our area. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the natural history, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit about some identification, because these singers, at least the ones that I'm going to talk about, we're able to identify them sometimes to species by their song. So that's a pretty cool thing, right? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Cricket Crawl, which is a citizen science event. This will be our 9th year holding the Cricket Crawl, and sort of what that's all about and the different species involved in that, and we'll kind of go over that a little bit. I am normally, I've given this talk a few times, I'm normally a really informal presenter, and normally I love to see folks in the audience and really see where they're at, and if they have questions and things like that. So if you do have questions, please type them into the chat box. And I think Saranella, if they're good and there's a moment to sort of ask them and interrupt, I think she will, and that's fine. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and start. So this is actually one of our singers, and this is my email if you guys want anything, if you have questions about the Cricket Crawl, or if you have questions about insects in general too, I can try to answer those as well. And maybe we can make this slide or part of this presentation available to people as a PDF. All right, so the Cricket Crawl itself and a lot of what I do would not be possible without a sort of three-way partnership between the Audubon Naturalist Society, the Natural History Society of Maryland, and Sam Droge's Bee Lab, which is the USGS Bee Inventory and Monitoring Lab out in Beltsville. And the three of those groups bring us the Cricket Crawl, basically. So I'm going to start off this evening asking a question, actually. Why do insects sing at all? Why do some insects sing? Because there's a whole lot of insects out there. There's many that are described species, and there's a whole lot more that are undescribed. And they tend to just kind of go under our radar, not just because they're small, but because we don't usually hear them. A lot of them don't sing. But why do these sing? Why do some insects sing? Well, it's interesting. So it's kind of like birds. If you're a birder, a lot of times males are calling for mates, males are calling for females, and insects are doing the same thing. Their males are usually the ones who are singing and calling, and they're calling in females. Sometimes they're advertising a territory, that kind of thing. But you're expending a tremendous amount of energy when you're calling, when you're singing. What benefit do you get from that? Why couldn't you, say, do a visual display, which some insects do? What's the benefit of singing? And actually, there's a lot of dangers that go along with singing too. I don't know if you guys can see the photo. This is a cricket. This is a ground cricket in the photo. And I don't know if you guys can see this small green blob right there where the cursor is. That's actually an external parasite of this cricket. All right, so there are predators and parasites waiting for these singing animals. Why do it? Well, crickets and katydids and all these singing insects that have been really successful doing this are advertising their fitness. It's basically, I'll use the analogy of dating, okay? So 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when you dated, you went to a bar or a church. That's how you found your prospective mate, right? But now we have the internet, and the internet lets you reach a whole lot more folks who might have the same interests as you. So singing is like that. It advertises their fitness over a long range, a wider, longer range. You have more mate choice. You're advertising yourself to many more individuals. So that's one of the reasons, and that's probably the biggest reason. And also, it's been successful. We see this at least in class Insecta, we see this at least in several different of the orders, right? And in one order in particular, and that's Orthoptera, we see this again and again, where singing is very successful, and individuals are doing this and being very successful at it. And it's been around for a very long time. So there's different methods of sound production. There's different methods of singing. Crepitation is one where the wings are snapped together. Shorthorn grasshoppers are the ones who do this. And right now, if you go out into a field and if you're walking along and you think, oh, what's that butterfly? And it's not. It's actually a grasshopper. It's the Carolina grasshopper. It has that white band on the bottom of the underwings, and it snaps the wings. This is probably a behavior to foil predators. And now there are courtship flights that they do that use this crepitation. So that's one instance. And I think Janine was talking to me before we really started. She was saying that she was playing some sounds of certain acridiids, right? These grasshoppers, and they were really hard to hear. Well, a lot of them are completely beyond the human hearing range. They're supersonic, and their songs are not able to be heard by us. And they actually use a mechanism where they rub their femurs against the wing to produce this very high-pitched song. Some of them you can hear, and they're usually day singers. But the method that we're going to focus on tonight and the group of singers that we're going to focus on tonight, they use a stridulatory mechanism. And this stridulatory mechanism, and there's a lot of different kinds of stridulation. Stridulation is just whenever you're rubbing the two body parts together, if you're an insect and you're making sound, right? The crickets and katydids all use two wings rubbing together. And in the two wings rubbing together, you have modified edges. So on one edge, you have a scraper, and on the other edge, you have a file. And those two wings rub together very quickly. Imagine, if you will, sort of you take your thumbnail and you run it along the tooth of a comb, and you get this very fast pulsing. And that creates the songs that we're hearing in the evening. And I want to stop here for a moment too and call out some folks who I actually could not do this talk without, and that would be Lang Elliott and Will Hirschberger, because this amazing photo of I believe it's a katydid wing with the scraper and file. This is Will Hirschberger and Lang Elliott's photo, and their book is wonderful. Their website is wonderful, which is Songs of Insects. And normally I use their website quite a bit when I am talking to folks about singing insects and playing them the songs that we're going to learn tonight. But first, before I even talk about like all of the crickets and katydids, I have to talk a little bit about cicadas. And I'm talking about cicadas because I think everybody hears cicadas and then they tell me, oh, I think I hear katydids during the day. And it's probably the cicadas. So the cicadas are day singers. They're diurnal or day singers. And we have the periodic cicadas, which are the ones that come out every 17 years, and next year is going to be the big emergence. But we also have, every year, we have the annual cicadas. And the annual cicadas, there are several different species in our area. I have this picture of a periodical cicada up because the sound production of cicadas is completely different from the orthoptera, the singing orthoptera. If you can see this little plate, that's a timbal. And that timbal is connected to some muscles. I think my next slide shows that. Whoops, go back. That timbal is connected to muscles, and these are these muscles, and they're super fast muscles. They're special muscles, and they pop in and out. If you can see here, they pop that timbal in and out very, very quickly. And that's actually what creates the characteristic song of cicadas. Now, the annual cicadas that we have in our area, they are usually living for about 2 years underground. They're root feeders, they're soil dwellers, and then when they emerge as adults, that's when the singing starts, and it's the males who are singing. We have 3 different species in our area. We have a number of species in our area, more than 3, but these 3 are probably the most common ones that you're going to hear. And I'm going to play the song of the swamp cicada, which is probably the most common one in our area. And I'm going to see if this is familiar to you guys. So I hope that was familiar to everybody. To me, that's always like about, you know, when it's late morning, mid morning, and the temperature's up because they're cold blooded, they're insects, they have to be warm enough to sing, and that singing starts. Swamp cicadas, as a species, they have that particular song, they have that will identify them. They also are identified by the time of day that they sing. They are morning singers. And as a matter of fact, another name for them is the morning cicada. So if you're hearing a cicada singing in the daytime, in the morning, that is most likely the swamp cicada, Tibicin chloromera. There are some other cicadas that we have in our area that are fairly common. The dust singer, which is of course singing at dusk. That's another nice way to identify it. But I wanted to play the song for this cicada, and this is...
Cathy, we have a question in the chat.
Sure.
Is the cicada that you presented the Dog Day cicada? And also, could you please play the previous song again, but a little louder?
Oh, okay. Some people call the annual cicadas Dog Day cicadas, but it's a little confusing because there actually is a species of cicada, which is an annual cicada, called the Dog Day cicada. So I'm going to keep on talking, and we're going to hear some more soon. But I always find I like to talk about cicadas because I think it's something that people do encounter on a regular basis. You can walk out the door when you're going to work in the morning, like we used to, and you can actually hear them singing, especially the swamp cicada. They're often in suburban areas and urban areas as well too. So they're good ones to know. I wanted to play the Robinson cicada because this one it's very localized. So they don't have this cicada in much of the East. It's got a fairly small range. And I've always thought that it should be renamed the DC cicada or the Washington DC cicada just because of the way it sings. And it has a very steady sort of plodding song, and it's actually pretty common. I've heard it on the mall downtown. I've heard it near the Potomac. It's often found in river areas, and this is one of our local cicadas. So I don't know, Sarnell, if you can, is it possible to play that? Yep. That's Robinson cicada. It's really boring. So I love that cicada. All right. Enough cicadas. We're going to talk about crickets and katydids. So crickets, once again, remember they use the two wings rubbing together, and it's usually the males who are singing. Crickets, there's many, many different species of crickets, many groups of crickets. And they have quite a varied sort of ecology and life cycle. They can sing during the day or during the evening. Most are omnivorous, and some are scavengers. And they really vary by group as to sort of how they're making a living. So these two pictures are two different species of field cricket. Now, quick, how can you tell them apart? Well, you can't. And actually, entomologists failed to tell them apart for, I don't know, 100 years. And then finally, somebody figured out that they were actually fall field crickets and spring field crickets. Not only do they look alike, but their song is also the same, which makes it really difficult for at least us to identify them. And they have very different ecologies, though. So the Springfield cricket is actually overwintering as a juvenile and then emerging earlier in the year. The fall field cricket overwinters as eggs and won't start singing until June. So the fall field cricket is pretty common in our area. And actually, when we first started the cricket crawl, we included the fall field cricket as one of our target species for folks to listen to because it sounds like such a classic cricket singer. It is the chirping on the hearth that everyone remembers. But we've stopped using it. We've stopped asking folks to listen for it, only because apparently there's some interbreeding that goes on within the genus Gryllus. So the fall field cricket and the sand cricket, and there's a couple of other ones that they may be interbreeding and they may sound the same. So we no longer listen for it, but it's still an interesting cricket. It's usually a burrow singer. So you hear it and you try to find it, but it's really tough to find because it's usually down in the crack of a sidewalk or in a hole or behind a brick and that kind of thing. And then you have to really try to move things and find out where it is. But that burrow singing is actually a great way to amplify your sound. And we're going to see that these singers oftentimes are using the environment to enhance their sound and get that sound out to a larger audience of other crickets. This cricket, though, the Japanese burrowing cricket, this cricket actually is on our list. And I think this is an incredibly handsome cricket. It's very loud. It's very easy to hear, which is always a plus. And we tend to find these in urban, suburban areas. It's got these beautiful white palpi, which are these little things on its face, which are sensory organs. And this is also a burrow singer. So this is sort of related to the field crickets. These crickets, you can find them once again in sort of tucked away underneath bricks and rocks, in buildings, like right at the edges, the foundations of buildings. And this is not a native cricket. It was introduced and it's naturalized. And as far as we know, it's not invasive, but it tends to be something that is not necessarily here originally. It was brought in into the United States in 1959 with plant material, and it's become established throughout the southeastern states. And a lot of times, this tends to be a sort of a more urban cricket or a suburban cricket. It's probably moved through ornamental plantings and come in. So crickets are pretty neat, and researchers have been studying them for things other than just their song for a long time. And I love this site that I actually have listed at the bottom. This is UC Berkeley, and this is a lot about evolution. And insects in general are great examples of evolution in action because their really rapid life cycle lets you see that in our human span, right? So this is the tale of the silent cricket, and this is kind of neat, all right? So I just told you basically that male crickets sing, female crickets respond, right? So in the song, they have a calling song, a big old calling song that calls the females in. And then in order to sort of seal the deal for the mating, the male usually has to do some sort of little song, like a little baby talk song, right? In order to be able to mate with the female. So that's where the female choice is coming in. The female's moving in, listening to what the male's advertising, and then sort of can he sort of seal the deal with his other little song. Well, on the island of Kauai, these researchers had been studying the Pacific field cricket for quite a long time. And the Pacific field cricket on Kauai is introduced, but it was a good study subject for what they were looking at. And unfortunately, a parasitic fly was introduced onto the island that the Pacific field cricket was naive to, had never seen before, had not evolved with it, and it decimated the population. And this particular parasitic fly, and if you remember, I showed you a parasite earlier on one of those crickets, it found the male crickets by actually listening. It could hear the song or feel the vibration of the song, hone in on the male cricket, and then parasitize them. And this was just decimating the population. And of course, you imagine being a researcher and coming out to the island and suddenly there's like no one singing, right? Your entire population of crickets that you've been researching is dying. Okay, so it's awful, right? But it's also kind of amazing because what you're seeing is this heavy selective pressure. What's going to happen? Well, what happened was males started to develop silent wings. So there were these males that didn't sing. They had an adaptation or a mutation of these silent wings. They had no scraper and file, right? So it was very rapid. It was 20 generations of crickets, which is about 5 years. And in that 20 generations of crickets, 90% of the crickets on Kauai were silent. All right? They were silent. but they were still there. So the researchers went out, and it wasn't like it was devoid of crickets. There was all these crickets there, but they were mostly silent. But there were 10% that weren't silent. And those males would sing, and the other ones would kind of hang around while that male sang. He'd get parasitized, and then the ones that were silent would mate. So this actually worked pretty well, which is kind of amazing, and who'd have thought, right? So something like 90% of the population in Kauai has silent wing adaptation, and you have this persistent, there's like 10% of the males that still have the ability to sing and call in females. And they found this was working for a couple of reasons. One, it was a really easy one gene mutation that was carried on the X chromosome, right? And the other thing that made it a really successful mutation was, well, there was a really heavy selective pressure, but also the females were not choosy. So they didn't care. They didn't care if you could sing the little song, they were like, okay, you're here, we're mating with you, So it's very interesting. And actually that site is great if you're a teacher, and if you want a resource to teach about evolution, and insects are a great model to use for that. So
Cathy,
that's the story.
we have a question from the chat.
Okay.
Does the Japanese burrowing cricket have predators here now?
I don't know that specifically, but I'm going to guess that anything that predates the field crickets may actually predate the Japanese burrowing cricket, because they have very similar lifestyles, right? So the way they sing, and they sing in a burrow, that kind of thing. But I don't know. That's a good question.
Thank
something
you.
something that would be good to answer. So
then Anna would also like to know a little bit of the basic anatomy between crickets and katydids, and how can you differentiate between the two?
Okay. Well, it's easier by song, but the crickets tend to be flatter. So flatter that way. Katydids tend to be taller, right? They tend to be more like humpbacked or taller, whereas the crickets, they are flat and they're on the ground, okay? Most of the crickets anyway, but we're gonna see some crickets that actually aren't on the ground, they're up in the trees. So that's a good question. So I would say it's a combination of, the crickets are usually brown, but sometimes they're green. They're usually flat. I would say that's the big thing. Yeah, they're usually flat, and the katydids are usually either humpbacked or sort of taller looking. Does that answer well enough? We're going to see some pictures, so I'm not just going to keep talking, and we're going to see some pictures of these guys, so
awesome.
That might answer. Okay.
And then Cathy would like to know if that phenomena where one sings and the other ones hang around.
Yeah, wingmen.
Maybe, exactly. Is it what originated the term wingman?
It should. So we're just going to say yeah. Okay. I like that question. All right.
Thank you. That's all for now.
All right. Thank you. All right. We're going to keep going. So just when I told you that crickets were brown, we're going to get to tree crickets. And tree crickets are often green, but they're flat. And these tree crickets you're going to find in shrub layers. They can be, depending on the species, they can be in different layers of the landscape. And that's when you're outside, and I don't really have a lot about this in my talk because I want to talk about different species, but when you're outside trying to identify what you're hearing, sometimes actually moving your head up and down, oh, okay, these singers are up here. Oh, these singers are down here. So they're separating themselves spatially within the landscape as well. That's something to keep in mind. So tree crickets, unlike the field crickets, which was what we were talking about before, those field crickets are on the ground. They're black and brown, and they're cryptic on the ground. But these tree crickets tend to be a paler color, whites and greens. Occasionally you get some browns, right? But they are more arboreal. They're more upper level canopy, mid canopy, and sometimes taller. So they have some amazing songs, and unfortunately I don't have any tree crickets. We don't have any tree crickets in the cricket count, just because they're too difficult to teach. and they're too difficult to discern, all right? But they have an interesting method of singing. So they raise their wings all the way up. The males, and this is a male both in this picture, do you see those wings are all the way up? So they stand their wings all the way up, and then they rub the edges together. This is so cool because this male basically is using this leaf. He has chewed out this part of the leaf, and he's using it as a sound baffle to increase his song so that he can reach more female crickets. And that's tool use. That's pretty cool. This is a mating pair of tree crickets, and you can see that the male is on the bottom. He's got his the wings raised. He's probably singing that little sort of baby talk song, that quieter, more intimate song. The female is on his back, and she's doing something really interesting. She is partaking of a nuptial gift that the male actually secretes from glands on his, I believe, the lower part of his thorax. Really cool. So there's singing, there's gifts, there's food gifts. It's pretty neat, right? And at this point, it almost looks like dancing to me when they hold their wings up like that. But that's just what they do. So there are other crickets out there that are also offering these nuptial gifts, and katydids will sometimes offer these nuptial gifts too. The bush crickets are interesting. The restless bush cricket, which we have around here, we can find them. The males don't secrete anything from that gland, but when they mate, they actually offer their forewings as a courtship gift for females. So that's an interesting behavior, and you can when you're out looking for them, if you find these sort of wings that are chewed on, you know a male has been mating. So these guys are mostly vegetarian. We can find these, I find these in a lot of different habitats. So this is a jumping bush cricket. I'm sorry, this is our, this is our jumping bush cricket. Sorry, I had to move my sign to see that. So this is our jumping bush cricket, and this is one that I want everybody to hear because this is one of the target species that we're going to listen for on the cricket crawl, and this is everywhere. For the past, I don't know, 9 years that we've done this, we've found that this is the one that you're most likely to hear wherever you are. If you're in downtown city, if you're in a place with very little vegetation, this one is the one you're likely to hear. Whether you're in a suburban backyard, whether you're in a park, whether you're in a really nice natural area, jumping bush crickets are the ones. So this is one that people may have seen. This is the handsome trig. This is a cricket as well, and they're named for their sword-like ovipositors on the female, which you can see right there. This whole group are sword-tailed crickets. The one in our area is called the handsome trig or handsome cricket, and this is an interesting one. This is one we find in meadows in our area, and they do this sort of constant movement up and down with their palpi. Their song is sort of a steady, ringing, singing song, but this constant movement that the male does with these palpi, it was sort of interesting. It's like, what is that behavior? And there was some researchers who found that this actually may be mimicking a jumping spider. I don't know if you guys ever see jumping spiders have these forelegs that they do this with. So I thought that was interesting because those can be pretty voracious predators. So it's a good thing to look like something that's kind of scary like that, and then you get left alone as a safety mechanism thing. So, all right. There's a lot of crickets, folks, ground crickets too, and I'm not going to try to let you sing, but I'm pretty sure people hear these as well. These are also day singers, and they can be very abundant, and there's a lot of different species. They sound like little bells oftentimes, like somebody's ringing little tiny high-pitched bells, and they're often all over your yard. And we have at least 2 species that are, once again, they're lookalikes, and they're almost all sound-alikes as well. So they're also tough, but they're out there, and they're really an important part of that sound that we hear in the summer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about katydids. We have the common true katydid, which is our one real katydid, although that sounds kind of mean because we have other katydids that are called false katydids, but they're cool too, right? It's just that unfortunately we call one the true katydid and the other ones are false katydids. The true katydid is a tree dweller. It's one that we find in the canopy. It's up in the trees, rarely ever comes down, but we don't really have a lot of information about them. They haven't been that well studied. They're not economically important, I think. That's why that they have never been well studied. We find with insects that the more they impact us as humans, the more money we have to study them, so they get studied. But since they spend their time up in trees, they're not great flyers. And the sort of observation has always been that they sort of live up in the tree and they pretty much spend their life up in the tree. They're born in the tree, they stay in the tree, right? And if you're born in the tree and you stay in the tree, you end up looking like the tree because that's how you survive, right? They're great leaf mimics. And there are tons of them. If you go out in the summer evening, you will hear this song. To me, this is truly the song of summer. So the common true katydid song is really the summer song. And they don't get started until dark, until after dark. This is a male. You can tell that we've got this sclerotized or brown region. That's the scraper and file. One wing is over the other, but they'll open up and then they'll rub together and they'll sing. But look at how amazingly like a leaf this animal looks. It's just extraordinary. These wings aren't great for flying, but they certainly are great for keeping you alive by looking like a leaf. The other thing in this picture, which I wanted to show you guys, is so we're talking a lot about sound production, but the females have to be able to hear the males, right? And this is a picture of ears. Look, there's ears on the legs. So katydids have their ears on their knees. Pretty cool, huh? So this is a female katydid able to hear where the male is with the ears on her knees. It helps if you're making a lot of sound not to have your ears next to the place where you're making sound. So having your ears on your knees is a good idea. You don't deafen yourself. So that's pretty important. Okay. That's a chorus of males. So what you guys were hearing, a chorus of males. Go down to just the sonogram part and play that one. I think that's an individual. There we go. Okay, I'm glad that worked. Did that work for most people, I think? Were you able to hear that?
Yes.
Good. So that's an individual singing. That's an individual male singing. And when they start, excellent, when they start to sing, that's what they sound like. What happens is that other males join them. And so you have an alpha male, everybody sort of kind of syncs up with the alpha male singer, and you get this rockin' chorus of and it sounds like the trees are shaking. You won't always get that here. You won't always get that in the burbs, but you will get the individual singers that you can hear that sounded more like the last song that Sarnell played for us. So, but if you're out camping or if you happen to live in a rural area, you can hear those males chorusing, and it's quite an amazing thing to hear. So there's safety in numbers. You're also calling in so many more females if you have a bunch of males singing together. That's the strategy, right? And you're sort of overwhelming anything that might want to find an individual, right? So if you're all singing together, it's really hard to pinpoint an individual singer. That's probably the other strategy for chorusing. Anyway. So,
Cathy, we were wondering, do they start singing midsummer?
Yeah, they start singing. Now, this is dependent on degree days. So this has probably been changing. So the phenology of when things happen, right? So when these things are happening in nature, and usually it'll be around July, early July, from what I can tell, in most of our areas. Now, I know there's people who are probably further north. I mean, it depends on your degree days. So the warmer you are, the more warm weather that you have, the sooner you're going to hear the common true katydid. And it would be interesting to know, when we get first songs of them. But I would say you should probably be able to hear them in early July. So, all right, let's see what else we've got. So I was talking about these false katydids. Now, these false katydids, they look a lot like the common true katydid. They're a little bit different. So they're usually a little bit more agile. They're better flyers. They are not necessarily up at the tops of trees. Depending on the species, they're going to be sort of mid-level in the landscape. And some of them are quite common. And they probably start a little later. Both the greater angle wing, which is here, and the lesser angle wing, they start singing a little later in the season. And if you notice, you can always tell a false katydid because if you see these forewings, the hind wings stick out from underneath the forewings. If I go back, the true katydid, the forewings encompass the hind wings. So they never have any hind wings sticking out the back, right? But all of our false katydids, and there's quite a few species, they will have the hind wings kind of out the back, folded out the back. But you can also tell that it's incredibly successful to look like a leaf because everybody looks like a leaf now, right? So all these katydids, they're all going to look green and veined, and they're going to blend in with the vegetation. So a little point about habitat. I know some of us live in places where we can create habitat and we can plant plants that katydids might love, but you're not going to be able to plant a forest in your backyard. But something simple like having some native plants in place, they're excellent places to lay eggs for things like the bush crickets and some of the trigs, the swordtail crickets. They provide perches, they provide cover so that the parasites and the predators don't get them. They're places to sing. And the big thing I tell people is if you're going to garden for insects, whether it's butterflies or whether it's bees or whether it's the singing insects, the crickets and katydids, be a lazy gardener, okay? Don't use a lot of chemical and use it judiciously, and for the most part, don't mow and don't cut things back. So leave stems up in the winter. Leave as much of that plant material up in the winter as you can, because that's where the eggs are overwintering, and that's where the juveniles are overwintering, especially for like the mid-level crickets, tree crickets, bush crickets, that kind of thing. So they've laid eggs in these plant stems, and if you cut the plant stems off, then they're gone. So keeping those things in the garden in the winter is really important. And just diversify, plant a lot of different things, plant different heights, plant different bloom times, and leave your yard unmowed, or leave a portion of your yard. I know so many of us feel that pressure. I know I do. I mow my front yard, I don't mow my backyard. We're not farmers, we don't need pesticides, right? We're not doing a production crop of anything, so we really shouldn't be using any sort of pesticide. Unless it's personal protection against mosquitoes and ticks, which is really a PPE, right? So you should be applying that to yourself, which is the best way to thwart ticks and mosquitoes, is to either use a repellent and clothing, a fan when you're out there, that kind of thing. So I'm saying, like, leave your yard as natural as you can. I know different people have different comfort levels for that, and that's okay.
We have one of our audience that is wondering, do you know why the katydid population seems to be on decline around the Rockville area?
Okay, I have not heard that. I have not heard that the katydid population is in decline. Now, that could be that I just haven't read some research about it, but as far as I know, they're not in decline, but they're very closely tied to trees. So if you spend your entire life in trees, you're going to need to have some sort of tree around in order to be present, right? So when we and I have some slides of this, we may not get to them. When we looked at the sites that people were finding common true katydids, we found that people were a lot less likely to find a common true katydid if there was a lot of impervious surface and not a lot of trees, right? So I think those things are closely tied. And just like so many other of our impacts on the natural world, it's all about how we impact the habitat of these animals. And oftentimes what we're doing is we're changing it and we're carving it up. But, you know, there's not a whole lot of hard evidence that I've read that says that katydids are declining. So
it
I hope
might
not.
be my wording. She said less abundant, and I reworded it.
Less abundant. Okay. I would wonder, I haven't done an analysis of even our data, because we don't really look at abundance. We don't count how many. So if she has some sort of research that's been done, please send it my way, because I would be interested to see that. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to go into talking about like habitat. How can we build habitat for them? I assume that you guys love to listen for them and we care about them. But a lot of people are like, I don't care. Why care? Right? So, you know, I've told people that aren't maybe naturalists, and they're like, so they're really important. And they're really important for food webs and for energy systems in our ecosystems, right? So in winter, the Carolina chickadee's diet is about half animal, and that animal is insect. And I have this slide right here. Do you guys see this jumping bush cricket? I'm kind of circling her right here. I watched this female for like an hour, just ovipositing, and this was in the fall. She was ovipositing into this red maple bark, and those eggs are going to be what keep the Carolina chickadees alive, right? They're out there foraging for any little piece of protein that they can get. And this is the incredible importance of these animals, besides the fact that we love to listen to them, right? But they're trophically incredibly important. They're, you know, they're food for so many things, right? And they're primary consumers. They're moving that energy up the chain, right? So you've got plants, which are the producers, but then insects are really they're really good at moving that energy. They're much more efficient than a warm-blooded creature at moving that energy up. They don't lose as much of it to body heat in the trophic webs, right? And you know, this is why we care about them. And I actually have a link, which you're probably not going to be able to hear, but some researchers were digging in a site, and they found fossilized cricket wings. They found a fossilized cricket wings, and this cricket ancestor left a pretty intact set of wings. They dated them to about 165 million years ago, and they were able to make a replica and recreate the song. And it's really beautiful. It's a similar to a bell ringing, and it's very delicate. It's lower pitched than a lot of the songs that we're hearing tonight, but it's a sound from 165 million years ago. And you think about it, these animals have been in our lives long before we had, but long before we could talk, long before we could make music. They were our music. They were our teachers. They taught us music, right? They taught us about song, and they taught us about music, and they've been part of our human lives for a very long time. So to me, that's certainly enough to care about them and to go out and experience them. I mean, I think if there's one thing that this year has taught me, is that we have very little control over a lot of things, right? And things end. But going out there and being able to really enjoy the things that are there are so important. So that's why I'm here this evening. And I hope you guys actually get out there, whether you do the cricket crawl or not. But the cricket crawl has been going on for quite a while. This is the 9th year. This is what our website looks like. And it looks like this because I have to do the website and I'm not a great website person, but somebody's got to do it. So I do. And it usually has the date that we're going to be doing the cricket crawl, and it usually has a map for the evening. We'll do some mapping. We may not do some mapping this year. I'm not really sure if we're going to have the capacity for it, but we're going to try. And you can also find the cricket crawl data sheet here. You can download it. There's all sorts of resources here. There's my slide talk that I'm giving tonight. So if you like any of these images, if you want to go and find out, oh, that Songs of Insects by Will Hirschberger, that website, you can find it here. You can find all of the songs. You can download the songs here. So I would highly recommend visiting that. And this is actually the website, Will Hirschberger's website, Songs of Insects. That's where I've been playing. Well, I was going to play stuff for you from there. That's where Sarah Nella's been playing stuff for you there. This is SINA. This is Singing Insects of North America. And Thomas Walker, I need to say thank you to Thomas Walker too. He is long retired. And I believe the University of Florida is maintaining his site. But if you want to dive really deeply into all the different species, other than the ones that I've talked about tonight and the ones that we're going to listen for on the cricket crawl, then this is the site for you. It's very extensive, especially if you're an entomologist or you're a real natural history buff for insects. You need to go to the Singing Insects of North America and look at Walker's page, because he is the granddaddy researcher of Orthoptera and singing insects.
Cathy, could you explain a little bit of what is the cricket crawl?
Yes. So the cricket crawl, and I'm got these 6 target species, which we just flashed 3, and then the 3 other ones. The cricket crawl it's a citizen science event, and I've got some photos. So we have people go out, and these are some lovely people who went out with me one year. People go out in teams, right? And you are going to find a place, whether it's your yard, or you open up your window and listen, or you go to your park and listen, or if you go to like downtown and listen, or if you go to your bar and listen, whatever, although don't do that now. But so you go out and you listen for 1 minute. That's the protocol, and that's important, because I know everybody wants to hear everything, and you can hang out and listen for half an hour if you want to, but what we're trying to do is get a little snapshot of who's singing at that point on that night. And you're going to listen for the 6 target species for 1 minute. If you listen and you find that you hear a couple of them, you're going to write those down. You're going to write down where you are. And then you are going to be able to, and I'm going to give you this information, you're going to be able to email us, call us, text us, send us a voicemail message, and tell us what you found. And that all comes into, I affectionately call it Cricket HQ, which is pretty much me and Sam Droege entering data. And and then we will email you back, and that will become part of our data set. And you eventually will end up on a map. Your observations, not you, but your observations for the evening will end up on a map. Some people like to do multiple sites. If you're going to do that, I would say leave some distance between those sites. Probably a 1/4 mile is the best, at least a 1/4 mile between them. Some people like to walk a little bit and then listen for a minute. And if you're going to do that, make sure you tell us where you are and what you heard, and only listen for a minute. That's important, because that standardizes it. It's a little bit like the Christmas count. So you're trying to standardize stuff. So for those of you who are familiar with bird counts, things like that, except we're not actually counting crickets. We're just listening for their occurrence. So you've got your 6 target species, you've got your friends who are part of your team, you go out with your data sheet, you listen for a minute and see what you can find, and then you tell us what you found. And you let us know, and then we put that in our data sheet, and then that becomes part of our historical data set. So, and this kind of thing, this kind of science project really it works well when you do it year after year after year. So you accumulate all of this data, right? So I hope that answered some of the questions. I don't know if I have any other pictures for us. I think this is a picture of the map for the first year that we did the cricket crawl. And the first year that we did the cricket crawl, we had no idea if any of this was going to work. And we had no idea if anybody was actually going to participate. That was the other thing. We weren't really sure if anybody was going to do this. And it was kind of like, if you throw a party, right? You throw a party and you think, oh, nobody's coming to my party, right? And you're hanging around, there's no one there. And then like a couple people come in and you're like, yay, great, there's a whole, and then like 2 hours later, like your house is happening and it's jammed and you can't get any more people in your house. And then somebody calls the cops, right? So it got nuts. We had a lot of people, and we had the biggest cricket crawl that we've ever had the very first year that we did it. We had like almost 2,000 data points. Okay, so that was a lot of folks who were out there listening, and these are all of the different observations all over the state. So groups had between 1 and 5 participants. We had nearly 2,000 species observations recorded. About 150 groups took part. And we still continue to have our cricket crawl. There aren't as many people, but we have folks who have been with us every year, and they continue to go out and listen for crickets and katydids and call into us, and it's a wonderful evening. And sometimes, if you're lucky, not only will they sing for you, but they'll come and do your dishes. So, and then you guys can send us a picture of false katydids coming and doing your dishes. So I think that's it. These are some graphs, which I'm not going to go into because I don't know if we have the time for that. I'm not sure if I want to. But here are some of the resources. I have a resource slide. I don't know if we can send this out at some point to any of the participants who did this today. And I think I have a thank you. Yes, I have an acknowledgement slide, and I need to thank all of these people, and there are probably more people that I need to thank as well. But definitely Lang Elliott and Will Hirschberger, if you ever get a chance to see Will Hirschberger speak, basically he has collected most of the song data in the Macaulay Library at Cornell, important researcher. Sam Droege, who's my partner in crime, Derek, who put together some of the early data gathering tools, Audubon Naturalist, Natural History Society of Maryland. I think Linda's here tonight, so thank you, Linda. And I will go ahead and take any questions that you have, because I think that we are on time, right, Sarnella?
Yes.
Okay. I was telling Sarnella that I had an incident where I went way over on one of these talks, so I didn't want to bore you guys, especially since my sound files are having trouble going over Zoom. So, all right. So I'm gonna stop sharing and open it up for questions. And I know Sarnella has some slides too.
Yes. So thanks everyone for hanging out with us. Right now, I will read the questions that have arrived in the chat. They are wondering, when is the cricket crawl this year? Is it local, or are there any other places around that it is happening? And if they can submit recordings and pictures.
Okay, good questions all. So the cricket crawl is on Friday, August 21st, and you start the crawl and you start the crawl at like 8:15, 8:30, whenever official darkness starts outside. You don't want to go out too early, things won't be singing. Don't worry, go out and listen for a while. Don't be ready just to do the 1 minute thing, right? People always ask me, is there a place that I can go to join the cricket crawl? And this is really a do-it-yourself kind of project. We want folks who are excited to go out and do this on their own. This takes a little bit of practice. I would say go out and practice with people and with either your phone or your laptop that have the songs on it, so that when you're out in the field listening, you actually have a reference song to listen to. So you're like, oh my God, what am I hearing? Everything's leaving my brain, right? And then you can use your phone, or you can use, just use your phone and pull up one of the websites, the Songs of Insects website on there, and hopefully it'll work for you. And you can hear the song, because it does for me in the field, and that's actually what I use. and then we encourage people to go out in teams because, it's evening and everybody should be having a great time, and you can have fun with another person, we think. I mean, you can go out on your own, that's fine, but we really like teams. And then you also have to give yourself a really good team name, okay? Normally, I would be doing some walks this year, but I have not done them. I have not felt comfortable enough because, that's just, it didn't happen. So, but those are good questions. They are the Natural History Society of Maryland. They may have folks who are getting together and sort of networking together to make groups. I'm not sure how they're doing it. So that, I hope that answers some of the question anyway.
Awesome. How long do they live, katydids and cicadas?
I had a question about how many reports do we want? You can do one report, like you can go out and do one report for 1 minute, or you can do 10. I have there's one particular team called the Vegan Biker Gang. I love their name. They go out and they do multiple sites. And somebody talked about sending in recordings. You can send in recordings, but it'll take us a while to listen to them. It may take me, a couple of weeks to listen to them, which is fine. I'll still take your data, and I'm still keen on that. That's okay, right? So, oh yeah, and Angela just reminded me that her daughter and friends won the best team name 1 year. So it's a real thing, you guys, the team name thing. So.
I think it was mostly because they made a cute video of them saying it and like crossing their lit up sneaker shoes, but that was it. I like, video was fun. I'll go for the added bonus.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
If we have any other questions and people want to either write it in the chat or unmute yourselves and ask them, you're more than welcome to do so now.
Hi, Cathy. This is Judy. Maybe I missed this, but did you say how long cicadas live?
So cicadas live for 2 years underground, usually, the annual cicadas. So the annual cicadas are spending most of their time underground 2 years, usually around 2 years, maybe 3, right? And then they live for a few weeks as adults. So their life as an adult is much shorter. So that's a good question.
And what about the katydids and crickets?
Once again, pretty short lives, a few weeks is pretty much max. You hear them longer than a few weeks though, because you have individuals emerging at different times.
But the katydids don't live underground, do they?
No, they don't. The katydids actually, the females will cement their eggs onto branches, and they look like little saucers, but they're tiny, like little buttons, like flat little buttons that are laid on branches.
Is that something we should be looking for?
Well, if you can. I mean, sometimes people find them, but that's really hard to. That's really probably going to be way up in the tree too. So if you're an arborist, then I say go for it.
Right. That would be fun to find those.
That would be. Janine?
Yeah. Somebody had asked about the camel crickets that are in your basement. I've never heard them make a noise. Do they not?
They don't. They're silent, and actually, they come from a lineage that makes noise. Theirs is the odd man out, right? They're silent, and they actually use feeling. They're tactile in the way that they communicate because they're in dark environments, and so they could have been singing, but apparently I'm going to guess there was some terrible selective pressure that probably quieted them, and they used a tactile sense.
Yep, they're creepy long antenna.
They do. All right.
Is there
anybody else?
I think I'm unmuted.
You are.
Yes, you are.
Are those the katydids that create a kind of crescendo at night?
If you're hearing a sort of a large chorus like that, that's probably the common true katydids. Yeah. If you're hearing a song at dusk, though, if it's not quite dark, like what time is it right now? It's 8:09. If you're hearing a song right now, it's just crepuscular, it's just dusk, right? That could be a cicada. There is a dusk singing cicada, and it's very loud and it crescendos. And that is, so wait until 8:30 before you guys go out and listen. So yeah.
Okay, and are they really loud then?
The cicadas are very loud. I forget how many decibels, but it's as loud as a snowmobile. That was the.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So.
Can you just give us the list of the 6? You said 6
target species. Yeah.
Target species. Yeah.
So there's the common true katydid. There's the lesser anglewing. There's the greater anglewing. There's the Japanese burrowing cricket. There's the jumping bush cricket. And there's the oblong-winged katydid. So, and that is all on our website. Great. That information is all on our website. And it's actually, if you just go for the downloadable data form, that is the best way to do this, because all that information is on the data form.
And that's where you can get samples and try to learn the song.
Yes, and I actually had a really good question in chat from Anna. She says, why those 6 species? Well, it used to be 8, first of all, and we cut it down to 6 because there was some interbreeding stuff that we weren't sure about. But the 6 species that we chose are, they're common. We wanted people to probably have a chance of hearing them, right? But they're also, they're common. They're also, we can hear them, right? They're learnable. We dropped one because nobody could hear it. People had a really hard time hearing it. So, and if you have some hearing loss, the greater anglewing may be a tough one for you. So that's why you need other people on your team. You always have to have a team. So, okay.
Tanya was asking if people can't do the 21st, but can do the following week, would you take the data?
I sure would. Just make sure that you tell me what the date is. So put it in big letters like, hey, different date, if you send that in. But yeah, we do take data a little later. So.
Thank you. I think that is all for now. So
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I'm going to go outside and listen right now.
That would be a good idea for everybody to go outside and listen right now. And don't get overwhelmed, all right? If you hear something or if you hear a bunch of stuff, don't get overwhelmed. Take your laptop or your phone out and just just listen. Just enjoy it. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for a fabulous presentation. Everybody have a great night. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you here with another amazing presentation next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys.